point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week number 301, our 301st episode of Energy Week.
I never did get those party hats.
No. Oh, well. Maybe when summer comes, we'll have.
When we hit 400, we'll get
Yeah. Okay. Every day I go to the internet and I get as much news as I can about climate change and energy, mostly energy. And when I find items that I think people would be interested in, I put them up on the, I do a 50 or so word synopsis and a link to the original article, and I post those as a group of 10 to 15 in a posting at a blog called geoharvey.com, named incidentally after me.
Clever.
Isn't that clever?
I never thought of that.
People say that I'm original, but I couldn't come up with an original name. It's really awful. Anyway, Tom and I take the 20 or 21 or 22 most interesting of these and put them together on Thursday mornings as we put together this show, which is recorded on Thursday mornings. Today is the 24th of January, 2019, and so we're going to be starting a week ago.
Yep.
On the 17th of January. We will try to keep you apprised of the date that we're getting the article from, which is not the date the article appeared, it's the date I found it on the internet, and it's the date I posted it. So if you go to geoharvey.com and click on that date on the calendar, you can find you will be taken to that day, so you can.
Well, the links.
Yeah.
So yeah, and some of these things, as I usually say, are well worth reading and far too complicated for us to
really give credit.
Really get into them. You know,
right.
We just cover the surface, but we could, and I've said this before, devote a show entirely to just one of these.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, some of them are that detailed, and I'll try. I've read them all, obviously, and I'll try and mention some of the better ones that you could look at.
Yeah.
Some of them are really, really good. They have videos that are worth looking
right.
at. One of them that I will mention has a really nice slideshow.
Yes.
You know, so
yeah.
I don't even know which one it is.
Well,
we'll
know when we get to it.
Yeah.
Should we just go ahead then?
Might as well.
Okay, we're starting with an article from CNN.
The world's coffee under threat, says the experts. The experts.
Say the experts. We've got a nice picture of this. A woman.
Let's see if I can find that picture there. She looks happy, doesn't she?
Doesn't she?
She's had her morning coffee, that's for sure.
The first full assessment of the risks to world coffee plants shows that 60% of the 124 known species are on the edge of extinction. Although only 2 species are used for the coffee we drink, scientists say the figure is worrying. That is to say, the numbers that are heading toward extinction, because wild coffee is critical for sustaining the global coffee crop.
I wouldn't have realized we only drink 2 species of coffee.
Right.
I know Arabica is one of them, but
I'm not surprised by that, because I mean, if you think about it, how many species of corn or wheat do we use?
I have no idea.
If you go through the vegetables that we use, and the grains and so forth, there are very, very, very few species, unless you're getting into something that's unusual. So if you go down to the co-op, you can find things like buckwheat, you know, and other unusual grains, which are not, buckwheat is not a cereal grain.
Not even wheat.
But normally when you're eating grain products in this country, you're eating things that are made from wheat, possibly corn, but very, very few species.
GMO.
Well, in the case of corn, it's
almost all GMO.
Almost all GMO. It's sad to think of, but that's the case.
Well, have you read this one, or did I forget?
Yeah.
I read its title.
Well, no, I read the wild coffee is critical for sustaining the global coffee crop, and a lot of the reason for that is because of climate change and other threats to the coffee. The things that are threatening the coffee are things that are forcing coffee plants to be moved. These wild coffees are, some of them, sustainable under circumstances that the domesticated coffees are not.
Well, they don't apparently make a good drink, but they contribute to the hardiness of the species.
Right.
Okay. Now, there's a couple of takeaways here.
Yes.
Because it's kind of interesting. 75 wild coffee species are considered threatened to extinction.
Yes.
With extinction. And the wild species are used to make the coffee crop sustainable.
Right.
Okay. Conservation measures are inadequate. Many of these wild coffees are not good to drink, but contain genes that help coffee plants survive in the future amid climate change and emerging diseases.
Yes.
So that's a pretty complicated issue.
It's complicated, and frankly, I don't know if the scientists who are worried because of things that would be of changes that could be made by standard breeding, or whether these genes have to be acquired by the species that we use through genetic engineering.
That's above my pay grade, I think.
Certainly above mine. Okay, our next item is from CNN also.
This is a good article, and it says climate, I'm going to put us up here.
Good idea.
Climate is the biggest risk to business, and in parentheses, and the world.
Yes.
And this is something to contemplate.
Yes. Companies and investors are waking up to the dangers of climate change. Business leaders and experts surveyed in the World Economic Forum say extreme weather, migration caused by climate change, and natural disasters are the three risks they are most likely to face in 2019.
Well, again, there's some takeaways here. Yes. Environmental risks such as droughts and wildfires are even more dangerous than turbulent markets or cyber attacks.
Absolutely.
Okay, the risk doesn't affect just the developing world where the infrastructure is often weaker.
Really?
Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria combined to make the United States the most disrupted region for the first time.
Yeah.
We remember those.
And that doesn't even count
that wasn't very long ago.
Yeah. That doesn't even count the wildfires that we've been having perennially in California and elsewhere in the West. It doesn't count tornadoes activity. It does not count some of the floods that we've had that were not associated with hurricanes.
You know, these things are combining into something really different. Well, there's a final takeaway here.
Yes.
And it is good news. Top investors are demanding that more companies draw up environmental action plans.
Right.
You got to be proactive here.
Well, they're also going to be, and I think they already are, but they will be increasingly active in demanding that actions be taken in Washington.
Oh, absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have another
picture. They have to wait a little while, I'm afraid.
I don't know. You know, we'll see what happens.
Yep,
I think that the government, the Republicans have associated themselves with climate denial to the point where they're going to have to break that association before they can, or they're going to be elected out of office. But
well, we'll mention some of this a little bit further on in the show.
Yes.
Meanwhile, we got a nice picture of Andy here.
Andy Cuomo. That's right. In the dark.
You know, I remember first listening to his father when his father was governor.
Yes.
And he had this most horrible Brooklyn accent. And I said, who is this jerk? And then I'm listening to him. And he had a horrible Brooklyn accent, but he was talking wisdom.
Yeah.
You know, the guy was really saying some good stuff. I said, who is this guy? And then I found out it was Cuomo. I said, oh, yeah, this guy's a smart guy.
How about Bernie Sanders?
Well, no, Cuomo had a worse accent.
Yeah,
and he didn't even grow up in Brooklyn. He grew up in Astoria. But
okay, well, there's a big difference between Brooklyn and Astoria.
Yeah, it's called the Gowanus Canal.
Yeah, okay. For anybody here in Vermont, it's called the Gowanus Canal. That's the difference between Brooklyn and Astoria.
Well, anyhow, getting back to New York Governor Cuomo announces a mammoth offshore wind and distributed solar... I'm getting this wrong. There wasn't any in there.
There wasn't a
New York Governor Cuomo announces mammoth offshore wind and distributed solar increases. And he has.
Yeah, this is from Clean Technica. In his annual State of the State address, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced plans to significantly upgrade the state's renewable energy targets, including quadrupling its offshore wind target to 9 gigawatts by 2035. This is a big deal. This is
Well,
not,
he's not playing games here.
no, he's not
serious.
playing games. 9 gigawatts of offshore wind power is equivalent to about 4 to 5 large nuclear power plants.
Okay,
So-
I'll buy that, sure.
You know,
Well, I got a couple of takeaways here because this is an important article.
yes, it is.
Focusing specifically on renewable energy, Cuomo unveiled a plan to mandate 100% clean energy by 2040. He also proposed more than doubling new large-scale land-based wind and solar resources and deploying 3 gigawatts of energy storage by 2030.
Yeah.
And it's going to be bigger than that even.
Yeah, there was an article today, by the way, about a wind farm in New York that got approval from the state, and it is in 3 counties. This is a
Three
big
counties?
3 counties.
Wow, we'll be talking about that next week, won't we?
We will be, yes.
Okay, he's also planning expansion to the state's ports. He wants to develop these ports so that they can support wind, offshore
Yes,
wind,
yes.
workforce development, and transmission infrastructure. And the aim of the investment is to solidify New York's position as the country's leading offshore wind hub, which it isn't yet. Okay, it's barely started.
The offshore wind hub is Block Island.
Yeah, that's about it. It would be the largest infrastructure commitment to offshore wind in the country. So
Yes.
this guy's biting off a big chunk.
Well, we should point out that Long Island has a big shoreline.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of sea off Long Island.
On both sides.
On both sides, that's right. And some of that, which is on the north side, could be shared with Connecticut.
Absolutely.
But I believe New York has got significantly more potential for offshore wind than Massachusetts. I'm not 100% sure of
I
that.
would not bet against that because I would think they do. Off the south, I guess it's the southeast coast of Brooklyn. Out there, there's a heck of a lot of potential for wind.
Yes, there is. There's a lot, no question about it. Okay, should we go on or?
Yeah, we got
more?
an interesting one here too. Ford says an electric F-150 is coming. And by the way, the F-150 is the biggest selling pickup in America.
Yeah.
I look in the parking lot behind me where the firemen park. They're all driving F-150.
You know, when I learned to drive, I
Yeah.
learned to drive in an F-350.
Which is bigger than an F-150.
It's bigger. It's
Yep.
a 1-ton payload. Anyway, this is from Clean Technica. Speaking to the press at the North American Auto Show in Detroit, Ford's president of global sales said, quote, "Here's what's going to happen to future-proof that global juggernaut of commercial vehicles. We're going to be electrifying the F-Series, both battery, electric, and hybrid," end quote.
They'll also be doing the van. They call it the Transit.
Yeah, this is a big deal.
Well, we got a little takeaway here too. Ford says it will invest $11 billion, which is a lot of money.
How much?
$11 billion.
11 billion.
Okay, in EV technology and plans to introduce 16 battery vehicles and 24 plug-in hybrids over the
Right.
next several years.
Right.
Tesla is talking about coming out with an electric pickup as well.
Yes.
Okay,
And
so they're
Ford is
coming.
going to have to compete with that.
When legacy, and this is big, this is a good takeaway.
Yeah.
When legacy automakers start planning electrical vehicles, it is only a matter of time before the changeover to electricity is complete.
Right.
It's coming, folks.
It's coming.
It's coming, folks. There's an
And
electric
you know,
vehicle in your future.
Yeah. Okay, should we go on?
Yeah, we got a nice picture.
We
coming
have a
up
picture here, and this item is from The Week UK.
Now let's pull up the picture first. That is the Drax power station.
Which,
And,
by the way, is not nuclear.
it's not, but we're going to talk about nuclear a little
We
bit.
are indeed.
UK signals a shift from nuclear to renewables.
The UK government has signaled a big shift away from nuclear energy and toward renewables after Hitachi announced that it was scrapping work on a new reactor because of plummeting costs of offshore wind and solar power. Only one nuclear plant is still being developed in the UK.
Well, that's Hinkley Point, and we talked about Hinkley Point on
We
the
have,
show.
yeah.
And I wouldn't bet money that it's ever going to be completed.
And we've said that, both of us, before.
It's currently 8 years behind budget, billions over budget, and will lock the country into paying 90 pounds per megawatt hour. It's hard to convert that to cents, dollars and cents.
Well, it's 90 pounds. I'm just going to say that's about $125 per megawatt hour, which is about 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour. But remember,
that's wholesale.
That's wholesale.
Yeah.
When you're done marking that up and distributing the power and all the rest of that stuff, we're probably talking 30 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity on the retail market. Kind of expensive.
It's comparing that to 60 pounds for offshore wind.
Yeah.
This is not what it costs.
Yeah, and probably 40 pounds for onshore wind, and probably 45 pounds for solar. So this is a bad bet. Nuclear is a bad bet in the UK.
I would say the government's long-term energy policy is now in doubt.
Yes, well.
Britain's impending exit from the EU may have had an impact on the decision.
Well, I'll tell you what did have an impact on the decision. I'm utterly convinced, and that is the people who run Hitachi watch this show, because we've talked about this before. Okay, that picture, as I said, is a picture.
Let's get it up again.
We don't. Yeah, okay. That picture is a picture of Drax, and that is a big wind turbine and at the Drax plant. The wind turbine is tall. The cooling towers behind it, I think, are taller. Those things are probably 16.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see the cooling towers, right?
Yeah,
look at them.
But they're cooling towers not from nuclear power. They're cooling towers from a coal-burning power plant that has been converted to natural gas and burning wood chips that are acquired by destroying entire forests in Georgia.
I was going to say Virginia, but yeah.
Yeah,
you're right.
And they promised Georgia we're only going to take forest falls and waste.
And they're not doing that.
No, they're cutting whole forests down.
Wow.
And this is considered renewable energy in the UK. Anyway, we should probably
let's move
on.
along here. Energy Department tackles challenge of rooftop solar and income inequality.
Yes, this is from Clean Technica. Economic justice advocates are taking note that rooftop solar power deployment in the U.S. has taken on a racial tinge.
That's interesting.
With significantly more penetration in predominantly white neighborhoods. The DOE, U.S. Department of Energy, is acting to take on part, though not all, of that issue. Honestly, Tom,
it's an economic thing.
I don't think this has to do with race, except
not directly.
Not directly. It's because the neighborhoods that are affected are poor, and there may be more poor neighborhoods that are white getting solar power, but I don't think that's the issue. I think it's just that they're poor that is causing
Well,
most
they
of the
do
problem.
mention it here. Low-income homeowners don't benefit from the tax credits. Okay, and
Yeah.
there are significant barriers to rooftop solar access for apartment dwellers.
Yeah,
I mean, like where I live.
yeah,
Housing Authority doesn't want to put anything on the roof.
yeah,
Because they've had problems with the roof leaking.
yeah.
And that makes sense.
Rooftop solar implies that you're going to have to attach the panels, because otherwise they'll blow away.
You're going to have to attach them some way to that roof, that roof structure.
Yeah.
And how can you do it without guaranteeing a leak?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a significant thing.
It's a problem.
Significant issue.
On the other hand, there are places that are trying to take steps toward offering photovoltaics, membership in PV community groups and so forth.
Well, there's a lot of different answers to this problem.
Indeed,
and
there
some of them
are.
are going to emerge.
Yes. We've talked about one in Brooklyn, a
Yeah.
microgrid, big microgrid.
Private, totally private.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of guys getting together.
Yep.
Interesting.
Okay. We are
coming back locally.
Yes. Saturday, January 19th, and we have a picture of fall foliage, and I don't even know where that could have been taken in Virginia for all I know. But nevertheless,
It does look like fall foliage, and I will bet $1 that has nothing to do with the story.
well, it was with the story.
Which is Keene, New Hampshire commits to 100% renewable energy goal.
This is from North American Wind Power. The City Council of Keene, New Hampshire voted 14-1 to adopt a goal of moving to 100% renewable energy the Sierra Club has announced. Keene joins 4 other New Hampshire communities, Concord, Cornish, Hanover, and Plainfield that have established the 100% renewable goal. And you know, Tad Montgomery, and we've had him on the show, and we've mentioned him many times on the show, is moving this weekend to Lebanon, New Hampshire, where he's taken the job as the energy coordinator.
Yeah.
And he talked about Lebanon also moving strongly in that direction.
If he's got anything to say about it.
Well, Keene, for those who don't know, because we do have people watching this show who are in foreign lands like New Jersey.
Like Brooklyn.
Like Brooklyn. Keene is about 15 miles, 20 miles
15 miles
from Brattleboro.
It's
so,
the closest big town, I think, to Brattleboro.
Yeah, and we've talked about Greenfield for a long time.
Yeah, and Greenfield's what, 17 miles?
South of us.
Just a little bit further.
So you have 3 communities that are in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. And, you know, when I was a kid and lived across the river in New Hampshire, those were the 3 communities that we would go to do any major shopping.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, should we move on?
Well, let's see. The resolution adopts a goal of using 100% renewable energy for electricity by 2030.
Yep.
For electricity.
Yes.
And for all sectors, including heat and transportation, by 2050.
Yes.
That's doable.
Yeah, oh, that's
quite
absolutely
doable.
doable. Okay, our next item is from High Country News. By the way, this item I found in a bunch of places, but I like the name High Country News for the item. That's why it came
Alrighty
from
then.
that.
Yeah, I'll buy that one. Idaho's new governor, this is a quote, "Climate change is real." Now, this is coming from Idaho.
This is not only coming from Idaho, it's coming from a new governor who happens to be a Republican.
A Republican, yep.
Idaho Governor Brad Little has broken with the Republican Party leaders on climate change, declaring unequivocally that the phenomenon is real. He said, quote, "I'm old enough that I remember feeding cows all winter long in deep snow. Boy, back in the days when I was a kid, we had winters," end quote. And it's refreshing to me, you know, to see people who are on the right, Republicans, conservatives, starting to open their eyes.
Well, they do mention that Idaho is one of the West's most conservative states.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Yes.
And they also say that Little's stance is a stark deviation from the Trump administration.
It sure is.
Which has minimized the effects of climate change.
Yeah, well, I think
I don't believe it, said Trump.
Yeah, I think the Trump administration would probably say that Governor Brad Little is a Chinese plant.
Not just a rhino, huh? Or a dino.
Yeah.
No, he's a rhino, I guess. Republican name only.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're coming back home.
Okay. We have an item here from Clean Technica, and it's about the Echo Leahy Center for Lake Champlain. We have a picture of that, which, by the way, as you can see if you look at it, came from the Encore Renewable Energy.
Well, it's an interesting picture of the Leahy Center.
It is indeed.
And the article is talking about what you're looking in there that's kind of bluish.
Yeah.
That is the Vermont's largest solar canopy.
Yes.
And the solar canopy is something that you can get underneath it. In this case, it's a parking lot.
Yes, and if you look just to the right, that bluish thing Tom is talking about is about halfway between top and bottom and slightly to the right. And if you look to the right of it, you can see the shadows of cars. So
yeah,
this is
pretty big.
It's big. It's not incredibly huge, but it's big. Okay, Vermont's largest solar canopy, Encore Renewable Energy's 156 kilowatt solar canopy in Burlington, has begun
Which
producing.
Isn't that big?
No, it's not. It's not incredibly big. This is about a 20th or so of the size of the array that Brattleboro has at the
former dump.
At the former dump, yeah. It has begun producing electricity at the Echo Leahy Center for Lake Champlain. Built in 2003, the Science and Nature Center was the first LEED certified building in Vermont.
Well, this power system's interesting.
Yep.
Because the panels are two-sided.
Yes.
Okay, they're getting power from the sun and getting power from the reflection off the whatever the heck is underneath it.
Yes.
It's roughly 10,000 square feet of two-sided solar panels
Yes.
to capture direct sunlight and reflected light
Yeah.
from nearby surfaces like the parking lot, the lake service, and parked vehicles.
Yeah.
And the manufacturers claim 10 to 30% average increase from the reflected light. So they're getting
It's
something
significant. Those double-sided solar panels do cost more, and they've been kind of waiting in the wings. The technology's been there for a long time.
Well, it's borderline whether they really pay for themselves or not.
Depending upon the situation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we are up to Sunday, January 20th, and we have an item here from Al Bawaba, and it has a picture, which I think is a very interesting picture, and we will see another picture like this later in the photograph.
That's the picture.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're ahead of me here.
Yes, no, I didn't jump ahead of you. You just didn't move away from
I didn't
the last
move quick
picture.
enough.
So when I put that up,
Okay.
it went straight up.
Oh, we got one coming up in between.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, we do.
Ah, you're right. Okay, this is from Inside Climate
Okay,
News.
so we'll get you up there
You wanna-
instead of that thing, and we'll save that for the next one.
Folks, forget that we showed you that picture.
Coal ash is contaminating groundwater in at least 22 states, utility reports show.
Coal ash.
Yeah.
Who'd have thunk? A clear.
I wouldn't have, no.
Well, if you'd asked me, I would have said, "Yeah, that sounds like it could happen."
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's not something that had crossed my mind. A clear picture of coal ash contamination in the U.S. is emerging as utilities report serious groundwater contamination in at least 22 states. In many cases, immediate environmental action has been required, and in several states, and there are several states that are moving on this.
Well, the article has a map in there, and it shows that this is concentrated in the West Central, Midwest, and South,
Yes.
okay, where there's still a lot of coal burning,
Yes.
power generation.
Right. When the water can get into the coal ash, and coal, if you're going to burn a lot of coal, you're going to have
get
a lot of ash.
ash.
And these ash piles are huge, and when water gets into them, it seeps through.
It seeps
and if
through, it
can get
leaches
in-
out all sorts of bad stuff, and it gets into the
Yeah,
groundwater.
and among the bad stuff that it leaches out are mercury compounds and arsenic compounds. And where do they go? They go into the groundwater, which means that nearby people are
Drinking
getting them in their own private wells.
However, the Trump administration is pushing to roll back federal rules
Well, of course.
for managing and cleaning up contamination from the billions of tons of coal-burning waste that have piled up across the country.
Billions
They've been
of tons.
saving them rather than throwing them away
Yeah.
because it's cheaper.
Yeah. Well, you know what cinder block is?
Yeah,
That's
Okay.
made out of ash.
it is, sure.
Yeah.
That's why they call it cinder blocks. Cinders
right.
are another word for ashes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, well, we
now
got
we've
that
got the
picture
picture
coming
from
up that we wanted to
Al
have.
Bawaba.
Bawaba. Say it again.
It
Bawaba.
sounds like a name that you would have heard on the Flintstones or one of those cartoons.
Well, it's Arabic. Al means the, of course.
Yes.
The Bawaba, whatever the Bawaba is.
I don't know.
Well, it got into Iran somehow, which doesn't speak Arabic, but that's okay.
Well, we were talking before the show about the fact that the Iranian language is called Farsi in the United States, and the reason it's called Farsi is because in Iran it's Parsi, and the Arabs don't have a P, so they use an F sometimes. And so we're trying to be ethnically correct, and we're using a word that is a name that comes from Arabic instead of a word that comes from the Iranian language of Parsi.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Iran is to construct 3,000 new small-scale solar plants in rural areas. And this is typical of what they're doing, although it may not be
Yeah.
in Iran.
This picture, Tom and I also looked at this picture and we thought, I wonder if that's in Iran. The person on the right of the screen there is dark, and darker than any Iranian I've seen. That picture might have come from Arabia, or it might have come from Africa.
Most
It's
likely
possible
from-
it came
yeah.
from Iran, but I don't know. Anyway, Iran's deputy energy minister said 3,000 new small-scale solar plants are going to be constructed in the country's underprivileged and rural areas by the end of the current Iranian calendar year, and that that year ends on March 20th,
That's coming up
2019.
quickly,
That's
isn't it?
quick.
Yeah.
That's only a couple of months from now. He said this adds to 2,000 plants already operating. Now,
So these things are popping up all over the place.
all over the
aren't
place.
they?
There's two of them in the picture there that I can see. There's one which is obvious in the foreground, and then just to the left of that, there's one farther away. And there's a couple of things about these that I find interesting. One of them is that's a tracking system. That's not a simple just kind of pop them up and let them go.
It follows the
thing.
sun.
It follows the sun in order to maximize the production returns. But another thing is, because it's a tracking system, you can get more energy out of it than you would out of fixed, which means that the shade that it throws is less.
The shade moves around.
The shade moves around, and it's less than it would be for a system that would produce the same amount of power. And this system happens to be in a garden.
Makes sense to me. Well, they're talking about reaching 1,000 megawatts by this year, which, as we already said, ends in March.
Yeah. So they're moving on this, and what they're trying to do is make sure that people in rural areas and underprivileged people and people who don't have electricity are getting power that they can use to.
Well, in places like India and Iran, and stuff like that, where there's so many people for so long have never had electricity at all, it makes more sense to decentralize the electricity,
Yes.
generate it yourself,
Yes.
than building these huge plants
Well,
and transmission
that's
lines.
true in almost every place in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's
it's
true
happening.
Yeah, and it's happening. And anyway, so our next item is from ABC News. We're still on January 20th, Sunday.
Aha. Frustration over feed-in tariff pushes Tasmanian solar producers towards batteries. And for those who don't remember, Tasmania is not a country, it's a state in Australia.
And
it's the island south of Australia.
Yeah, it's south of Australia, which means that it's colder than the rest of Australia. It has
more temperate.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, well, I'll just read this. There are about 28,500 Tasmanians with home PV systems. Over half of them installed their PVs before September 2013, when the feed-in tariff was about 28 cents per kilowatt hour.
That's pretty generous.
This is Australian.
Yeah.
So the
So it
Australian
might be a
dollar
little
is
bit less.
a tiny bit less than 3/4 of the American dollar in value. So this is probably about 20 or 21 cents.
Yeah, but now
that-
you got to drop the other shoe.
Yeah. Now that the FIT is dropping to 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour, by which we mean maybe 6 cents per kilowatt hour, many of these people are getting batteries.
Instead of feeding into the grid.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're not getting.
It's not enough
what
of an
it's wor-
incentive.
It's not an incentive for the
And
grid.
the articles indicates these people are rather upset about it.
These people are very upset about it. It's something that we talked about in the past.
Yes, we have.
And, we were saying, when you get to a point, and it's happening in the United States in places too, when you get to a point where the utility prices are too high and the incentives to put solar on the grid are too low, you're going to have people who are putting in solar get batteries and just get off the grid.
Well, you're seeing things like this happening in Vermont for slightly different reasons.
Yes.
You buy a piece of country land that's not connected to the grid. The cost of connecting it to the grid is enormous.
Yeah.
They got to run these poles and all of that, and it's very costly. It's a heck of a lot cheaper, and this is happening.
Yes.
To buy the solar panels and put up your own system.
Right.
I know several people who are doing exactly
Nancy
that.
Ray Mallory, who is the editor of Green Energy Times, which I write for.
Sort of your boss in a way, huh?
She's my boss. Have you met Nancy Ray?
I don't think so.
I think you did once.
It's possible.
Yeah. She's a very pretty woman.
Uh-huh.
She was the first runner-up in the Miss Harley Davidson World Contest in 1983. But anyway, when she built her house where she is now, she had a choice of putting in a solar and battery system. This was quite a few years ago, or putting in grid power, and she chose the solar and battery system for reasons she would have preferred that anyway, but
the economics were
the
there.
economics were strongly in favor of going solar and battery instead of going to grid power. Since that time, the cost of grid power has gone up. The cost of solar and battery has gone down. So
It's
you don't
even more compelling.
It's even more compelling. A couple of telephone poles costs as much as the battery system when you're putting in a.
Oh, sure.
You know.
I've known people who have lived without electricity because they couldn't afford to bring it in.
I've known people who, my landlady, who has lived for years in Guilford off grid, and nobody on her road had electric power because it was so expensive.
They turn on a generator for a couple of hours a day.
The ones who had power were using solar. She was using solar power and batteries, and she's pretty frugal, so she didn't need a big system. Anyway, we are up to Monday, January 21st,
Well,
with
this
an
is
item.
interesting. We got a picture coming up.
We do
here,
indeed.
too.
We have an item from the San Francisco Examiner.
And this is a little deja vu, I think, from last week.
Deja vu again?
All over again, yeah. This is a reservoir,
Yes.
okay, with solar panels on it.
Yes.
And we mentioned last week that this is a win-win situation.
Yes.
So San Francisco moves toward public power and a local version of a Green New Deal.
Now, the Green
Where did I
New
ever hear
Deal.
that
Yeah,
before?
right. The Green New Deal is coming up more and more and more.
Yeah.
Congress didn't give Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez what she wanted.
They will.
They will. Because what's happening is the states and the cities are adopting the Green New Deal. Okay.
Well, Cuomo's already got his own Green New Deal.
We're going to get to that.
And we talked about it already.
San Francisco's push to move to a public power system after PG&E said it will file for bankruptcy is not the only big energy plan in the making. Supporters of the city's renewable energy program are calling for the city's own, quote, local version of a Green New Deal, end quote.
Well, you glossed over this public power system
Yes.
quickly, and that's
Yes.
interesting
Yes.
because PGE is a private company,
Yes.
and the public power system would be owned by the city of San Francisco.
Yes.
So this is a large departure.
Well, since I was in college,
It's socialism.
and I was, well, I had had friends who believed that a public park is socialist.
Yeah.
It had to be avoided. We should
yeah.
have that park be regulated, maintained by a private
Turnstile on the way
organization.
in.
Yeah, and our prisons and our police should be privatized, and our roads
Well, there are
should
people who believe in it. If somebody's not making money on it, it ain't worth doing.
Well, yeah.
That's kind of an axiom among some Republicans.
It is, and the farther I see us going down the road that I'm going, the more convinced I am that a free market is a wonderful idea if it operates.
If it's free.
Well, if it operates on the basis of
Freedom.
Simple regulation to make sure that people are not being cheated.
Yeah.
Because what they're asking for is no regulation to guarantee that people are not being cheated, and simple regulation all of a sudden gets really complicated when you try to get it done in reality. And so I'm beginning to think that the free market that they're talking about is not even worth thought.
Well, it's really not free.
It's not. The free market is an excuse to bolster the people who dominate whatever market it is you're talking about.
That's true.
And
Well, let's move along on this one because this is kind of interesting.
The one from China?
Yeah, there's a group in San Francisco called Clean Power SF.
Okay.
Well, it's the government. It's part of the government.
Yeah.
It's a San Francisco program to significantly increase the proportion of local energy, of electrical energy from local renewable sources.
Yes.
Decrease greenhouse gas emissions and help combat climate change.
Yes.
They support an aggressive build-out of local renewable energy projects, such as what we see here in the picture, and I'll bring it up again,
Yes.
the Sunset Reservoir solar energy panels.
Right.
And we mentioned that there's a lot of side benefits, like it cuts down evaporation.
Oh yeah, and keeps the panels cool so
And
that
keeps
they're
the panels
operating
cool
at the
so they
most
operate a little bit better.
more efficient.
So it's a kind of a win-win situation
Right.
here. And
Yeah.
for the most part, reservoirs are rather wasted. I mean,
Yes.
you can't fish in them, you can't swim in them, you can look at them, And if they could figure out how to charge you to look at them, they would do that.
Well, one of the things about the free market is that I fail to see where the free market has any reason to protect the environment.
They don't really. Yeah.
Which is why the environment is in such trouble, because we've got people who are saying that we need a free market. I'm going to say in quotes, free market.
Quotes, yeah.
And what they're looking for is, in fact, a market that can be dominated by a group of people who have got enough money to buy themselves a Congress or two and a president or two.
They wouldn't do that.
Well, they've done it. You know, I really deeply resent the takeover by people who say they are American presidents, patriots, and say that they are conservatives, who have absolutely no. They don't protect the democracy. They don't protect the United States. They don't protect the principles of conservatism. I voted for the man in the last election who was closest in his principles to Theodore Roosevelt.
Yes, you did.
And that man is a socialist. Bernie Sanders.
That's very interesting, really.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
It really is.
Well,
okay,
let's move along here. We
if
got
they're
a
going to
picture
complain
coming up.
about socialists because the people advocated government ownership of something, they got to throw out, along with all the other socialists, Benjamin Franklin and Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt, you know, and you just go down the list.
Well,
Richard
we got
Nixon.
highways. That's socialism.
Yeah, absolutely, it's terrible.
State, we got parks. You know.
And
as
you know,
mentioned.
where did the term communism come from, or commune? Where were the first communes?
I don't know. Where were they?
When were they?
When?
Middle Ages,
Long time
in
ago.
Italy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, what is it? Commons? Well, the commons is the place where all the people, in a more or less democratic manner, can graze their cattle.
That's what they
You know,
did.
but it has nothing to do with socialism, and they've taken the term socialism and
Well, it became a bad word.
it's a label that they put on things in order to support the economic ends, short-term economic ends. All right, I should get off of this and talk about energy. We have an item here from the Durango Herald. Is that what's next, or is it from?
This
no,
is
it's
the
from the
Maritime
Executive.
And we don't have a picture. That's what
We
the
do
next
not
one.
have a picture, right?
Okay, China approves 24 offshore wind projects.
The Chinese government approved 24 offshore wind projects off the coast of Jiangsu Province.
Wherever the heck that
Jiangsu
is.
Province, wherever the heck that is. Well, my guess is that it's on the ocean. Local media reports that the projects have a total capacity of 6.7 gigawatts.
That's significant.
That's significant, and will involve an investment of $18 billion, just to put
That's
a price
significant,
on the significance of it. The wind farms are expected to be operational by the end of 2020. If this was a nuclear power plant, they would say it's going to be operational by 2030, and they'd be off by 10 years. It would be operational by 2040, or maybe not at all.
Maybe not at all. Well, there's a quick takeaway here. China was responsible for almost half of the world's $25 billion investment in offshore wind last year.
Yeah.
So they're getting onto this.
They're buying half the electric vehicles. They're buying 95%, building 95% of the electric buses.
But they're a communist country.
I don't
They
know.
are also boosting pump storage capacity
Yeah.
to facilitate the integration of renewable energy into its electricity grid.
And they are taking the position of world leadership that the United States walked
Is
away from.
relinquishing,
Yes.
unfortunately.
And I don't see how you can argue for or against that. That's just a matter of, all right, there was
That's reality.
Paris Climate Agreement, and we just said we're
That's
leaving
reality.
it, and we're the
Simple
only
as that.
country that is.
Well,
Okay.
Let's move along here. We got a picture coming up.
We have a picture from the Durango Herald.
And I will try and get that up. And there it is. And it is some guy installing solar panels.
Some guy, that's right.
Electric Co-op sets ambitious goal to cut carbon by 50%.
La Plata Electric Association set ambitious goals last week to cut its carbon footprint by 50% and keep costs lower than 70% of its peer cooperatives in Colorado. LPEA gets 95% of its electricity from tri-state generation and transmission. We've talked about that organization
we have.
before, which is heavily dependent on coal. And what they're saying here is a little different than a couple of organizations that have negotiated very costly withdrawal from that co-op because they had to buy out their contracts. In this case, they're planning to put pressure onto Tri-State to move away from coal. And if Tri-State
exactly
does
what
that,
they're trying to do.
If Tri-State does that, they are not going to be the only organization in the Tri-State group that's going to be moving in that direction.
Well, this is interesting because this is a co-op of co-ops.
Yes.
Okay, the bigger organization is a co-op.
Right.
That's all the members are themselves co-ops. So
Yes.
it's a kind of interesting way. And this happened back in, the 20s and 30s when it was not profitable to bring rural electricity
Right.
to
Most
some of these
the
remote places.
I
So they said, go away, we'll do it ourselves.
Yeah, and it was I don't know, but I think most of the electric utilities in the United States today are still co-ops. Certainly,
The
there's
country as a whole, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, back here in the east, it's not. It's the opposite.
and that's not the case in most urban areas.
The urban areas,
but if you're looking
it was
at the
profitable.
Right, if you're looking at the co-ops, just the number of co-ops, and you find how many of them are.
Well, you look at North Dakota.
Yeah.
You know, it's a huge state.
Right.
And it's, I think, got a lower population than Vermont.
Bigger, I think, but it doesn't matter.
Not by much.
Not
If
by
it's bigger,
much.
it's not by much.
I think there's only one state that's smaller.
Montana?
No, I think it's Wyoming.
Well, could
Well,
be. It's one of,
it doesn't matter.
in any case,
Yeah.
what we're talking about is big states, small population.
Right, and what happened in the West was
There wasn't any money in it.
there was a bunch of co-ops. They all had to put their money into transmission in order to get power out to Aunt Mary Lou, who was out, 17 miles out into the countryside. And this was happening in the 1930s with help from the federal government. And
Yeah, the Works Progress Administration.
yep, and they didn't have a central processing plant that could, generating plant that could generate the power. So the co-ops would band together into a bigger co-op to get those plants. And here, Tri-State Generation and Transmission is the owner of a bunch of plants that is selling electricity to co-ops, but those plants are using coal, and a number of these co-ops want to stop using coal. So they're pulling away.
Well, yeah, for a lot of very good reasons right now.
Yes, right. Okay,
So
we're
let's
up to
move along
Tuesday,
here.
January 22nd. And
This is scary. This is a
disturbing
scary
item
article.
from CNN.
Disturbing is a good word.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do is adapt. Greenland ice melting reaching a tipping point, the study finds.
Climate change is causing Greenland's massive ice sheets to melt much faster than previously thought, a study found, and it may be, quote, too late, end quote, to do anything about it. The findings could have dire implications for the planet's low-lying islands and coastal cities, and it doesn't say it right here in front of me, but those cities include Miami and New York and Charleston, South Carolina, and
this
Boston.
is from CNN, and
Yeah.
you've heard me mention before, CNN usually has some pretty good quality stuff.
Yeah.
This particular link includes a 7-minute video,
Yes.
and it's well worth watching.
Yes.
It's scary, but it's a good video.
Yes.
And the message is, what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic.
Yes.
Okay? 8 of the Earth's 10 largest cities are near coasts. Nearly half of the planet's population lives in areas vulnerable to rising seas.
Yes.
We don't even think about that. New York, Miami, we know about that. Boston. Okay, the research found that humanity may have passed the climate change point of no return, and that's very scary.
Well, I think, in fact, that's where we are.
I think we
Although
are.
this tipping point may be something that we will generate technology to get back across the
God, I
other
hope
way.
so.
But we're going to have to be proactive about this. And the more we put it off, the more proactive we're going to be in the future. Our children and our grandchildren are going to have to pay, literally, money for our reluctance to deal with this.
You know, I'm thinking about this video, and it's pretty. It's mostly about Greenland.
Yeah.
And it's the mountains and it's the glaciers, and they
Yep.
show
Yep.
them. And I find it interesting. One of the areas of Greenland is the It's named after the Norse goddess of death.
Okay.
And it's called Hel. She's called Hel.
Yeah.
Hel. But Greenland alone sheds 300 gigatons of ice a year.
It's 300 billion tons. And
That's the land.
yeah, and
Wow.
I want to, and that because it's coming off land, it all contributes to
Sped.
ocean rise.
Absolutely.
I want to mention something here. I mentioned something about ocean level rise to a person here in Brattleboro a couple of months back, and he said, "Well, how do you know that it's ocean level rise and not the land subsiding?"
Well, it's a little bit of both in many cases.
In some cases, it's both. In some cases, it's just sea level rise. But the thing is, the question: how do you know? Well, it happens that we've got satellites in space that measure the height of the ocean,
Yep.
and those I actually tracked this down.
Did you really, huh?
Yes.
Busy little man.
Yeah, and they those satellites have mapped all of the oceans of the Earth. It's not just along the seacoast, it's all of the oceans. So we know what the oceans are doing independently of land subsidence, and they can get the average height of the ocean relative to the center of the Earth. They didn't express it that way, but it's clear that that's what they're doing. They can get the average height to within 1/4 of an inch. So they are, and this is using lasers.
So they're pretty accurate.
Laser metrics from satellites. Yeah, they're measuring waves going up and down. Well, they can keep track of how high those waves are. They know how far they are from the center of the Earth, and they can keep track of how far they are from those wave heights. And all they've got to do is average it out, and they get the average to within 1/4 of an inch. That's what they say. But
Well, we've seen pictures of Miami.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, we should move on. We've got a picture
we got a
here
nice
of
picture
the
coming up
Back
here.
Bay. This is an interesting picture, I think.
Back Bay in Boston.
The Back
Boy,
Bay of Boston, and this is from Electric
you know,
Light and Power.
I find it interesting how busy the roofs are.
Yes.
They must spend a lot of time up on the roofs.
Well, and the thing that I find interesting about this is that almost every one of the little buildings you see on that picture is probably identical or a mirror image of the building next to it.
Yep, they are.
And
They're
they
all
have
the same.
they have variations going on where they're taking a set of bay windows and they're turning it into a slightly different shape, or they're making a building a story
Well,
taller.
it's basically the same building.
It's
Yeah.
basically the same building. That front row is the same building over and over and
Over
over
and
again, with different appearance, different colors. You know,
Now, one thing that's interesting is there's very few solar in that picture.
yes, that's true.
There's
But-
some. You can see
yeah.
it in there if you really spend some time looking. But you got to look for it.
Yep. What do you have for a title on this, Tom?
Massachusetts bill would set new emissions requirements.
A bill filed in the Massachusetts State House seeks to help speed the state's transition to renewable forms of energy. The bill would update the state's emission requirements 50% below 1990 emissions levels by 2030, 75% below by 2040, and net zero emissions by 2050.
Lawmakers last year proposed a bill that would press Massachusetts to achieve total renewable electricity generation by 2035 and phase out fossil fuels across all sectors, which we already mentioned,
Right.
including heating and transportation by mid-century.
Right.
So they're going after it.
They're going after it.
They know what they're doing.
Yep.
Well,
Okay,
move along
our
here,
next
we-
one is from PV Magazine International, although it is about New York.
And we got Andy back.
We
No
got
picture
Andy.
of him this
That's
time.
right, no picture.
New York Governor's Green New Deal. Where'd I hear that before?
All of a sudden, New York has got a Green New Deal.
Starts with 1 gigawatt of large-scale solar. And I think we mentioned that already, but this goes into
This
it a little
goes
bit
into
more.
a little bit of details about specific stuff. New York State has awarded 1 gigawatt of solar and 614 megawatts of wind. 3 of the 20 3 of the 20 renewable energy projects commissioned are paired with energy storage. Invenergy, EDF, and NextEra are each set to build solar projects with capacities greater than 100 megawatts.
Well, they got a list there, and they're all over the state, mostly in the western part of the state.
Yeah.
Nearest one to us is outside of Saratoga.
Oh,
Okay, so they got a little bit going on.
yep.
NextEra secured more than a third of that total solar capacity.
Well, I bet they popped a few corks.
Well, I bet they did. Regional developers also caught a fair share. So it's local as well,
Right.
other than NextEra, which is a big outfit we
Right.
talked about.
We're running out of time, Tom. We should.
Well, we got 4 minutes.
Yeah, and 3 items.
The projects were 14% cheaper than those awarded a year ago.
Yep. Now, here is the next picture of solar in a garden.
Yeah, we.
And this is from a publication called Civil Eats.
And that's called Agrivoltaic, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about. Agrivoltaics are solar panels on farms, which could be a win-win.
A dual-use solar installation is sometimes called agrivoltaics. The system uses a PV array raised far enough above the ground and spaced in such a way that some crops can still grow around and beneath the panels. It enables farmers to diversify their incomes by generating renewable energy.
Makes sense to me.
Yep.
Interesting article is a story about how agrivoltaics originated in Massachusetts. And
Yeah.
it's interesting. We're not going to cover much of it now, but in
Okay.
any case, the lights, these panels are separated. They're not all in one row.
Yeah,
so
there's
room
space
underneath.
between them, and the sun
The
is
sun filters
shifting.
through it.
Yeah, and the sun is shifting, so shadow is cast on some of the plants all the time when the sun is shining, but every plant also gets full sunshine part of the time. Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica.
8-Minute Energy, which is the name of a company,
Right?
boosts solar plus storage pipeline in excess of 10 gigawatts. That's significant
That's
too.
a lot. The largest U.S. private solar and storage developer, 8-Minute Energy, announced last week that it has entered into a joint venture with J.P. Morgan Asset Management to support 8-Minute Energy's current 10.7 gigawatt pipeline of solar plus storage projects. And 8-Minute Energy is one of the biggest renewable energy companies in the country.
Well, I got a little quick takeaway about that.
Yeah.
They hold the record as the first developer in America to beat the price of fossil fuels with large operational solar PV.
Yep.
And they have the current record low price for a solar project in the country. So they're aggressive too.
Do you have what the price is?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I didn't write it down.
Our next item and our last item is from CNN, and we have a
and
picture
we got a
here.
picture here.
And for those who have never heard the term before, that is what's called a ghost forest.
Kind of looks ghostly to me,
Yeah.
doesn't it, huh?
Yep.
Record number of Americans very worried about climate change.
More Americans now say that climate change is a real threat to themselves and others. According to a climate report by researchers at Yale University and George Mason University, 29% of Americans are very worried, and 73% they say they believe global warming is happening. And of course, there's a pretty consistent group of about 15%, I forget whether it might be 14, 16, something
It's
like that.
14%.
14% who say they don't believe it's happening at all.
Well, this again is a CNN presentation.
Right.
And as I said before, CNN usually does a pretty good job.
Usually, yep.
They got a slideshow here of 14 pictures.
Yep.
They're worth looking at.
Yep.
And there's a quick takeaway here. Those who think global warming is happening outnumber those who think it isn't by more than a 5-to-1 ratio.
Right.
Steady at 14%.
And what's going to happen is that as time goes by, because global warming is happening and it's destructive, more and more people are going to realize that this country is under threat of destruction to
And
its
they are under
infrastructure.
threat.
Yep. To its infrastructure, to the buildings, to the roads and so forth that exist along the seacoast, and they're going to get more and more resentful against the people who have caused this to come about. And they might as well just face that.
They might as well.
But we are at the end of our show.
I think we've covered it all. Let's
why don't you put
see
us
what we
both up?
look like here.
That's what we look like. Should I put this little guy up that says "Have a perfectly lovely week"? Have a perfectly lovely week. See you next week.
See you next week.